They say every man has a line he will never cross. For Hank Hill, that line has always been football, the sacred game of Texas. The heartbeat of his community, the one thing he swore would never change. But in one shocking moment, Hank does. The unthinkable. He turns his back, not on his family, not on his propane business, but on football itself. And what causes this betrayal? None other than the game he once mocked, the one he called un-American. Soccer, Hank Hill has always been more than just a character. To fans of King of the Hill, he's a symbol of old-fashioned values, a man who stands for tradition, respect, and stability. And in Arlen, Texas, nothing is more traditional than football. Football is not just a sport, it's a way of life. It's Friday night lights, stadium bleachers filled with entire towns, and fathers raising sons with pigskin dreams. For Hank, football is not simply entertainment. It's a moral code, a living example of teamwork, discipline, and strength. From the very first seasons of the show, Hank's passion for football was clear. He spoke about it with reverence, like it was part of his very identity. His tone changed whenever football entered the conversation. His posture straightened, his voice deepened, his respect sharpened. Football wasn't just a game for him. It was the foundation of American pride, but alongside football, there was another game always lurking in the background. A game that Hank couldn't stand. Soccer. In Hank's world, soccer was strange, foreign, and confusing. He would look at the field, see players running endlessly without a touchdown in sight, and shake his head. To Hank, soccer lacked the toughness of football, the structure of baseball, and the precision of basketball. It was, as he once put it, a game of running back and forth until you collapse. This wasn't just harmless banter. Soccer represented something Hank didn't understand, a shift in culture. While football had been the king of American sports for generations, soccer was quietly becoming more popular, especially among kids. And for a man like Hank, who built his life around propane, steak, and Sunday football, change was not welcome. He feared that if soccer grew too big, it might take away from the game he loved most. The early episodes painted Hank as a stubborn defender of football, refusing to let soccer anywhere near his world. But over time, the writers of King of the Hill began weaving soccer into his life in ways he couldn't avoid. His son Bobby, never the tough athlete his father hoped for, found himself drawn to things Hank didn't understand: comedy, theater, and yes, even soccer. Hank would watch in frustration as Bobby preferred goofing around with a ball at his feet rather than tackling on the field, and so the stage was set. Hank Hill, the man who worshipped football, was forced to confront the one sport he despised. This wasn't just about games, it was about identity, about fatherhood, about the future of tradition itself. And all of it built up to the controversy in episode 1405, where Hank makes a decision that shocks both the town of Arlen and fans watching at home. What makes this moment so powerful is the weight behind it. Hank isn't just a man saying no to soccer, he's a man caught between two worlds. On one side stands his loyalty to football, a sport tied to his past, his culture, and his pride. On the other side stands the creeping reality of change, a reality he can't stop even if he wants to. His son, his friends, and his town begin to pull him toward a game he swore he would never respect. To understand why Hank turning his back on football is so shocking, you have to understand just how deeply football is tied to his sense of self. It isn't just about touchdowns. It's about America, Texas, and everything he thought was permanent. That's why this story isn't really about sports, it's about the fear of losing what defines you. Hank's struggle is every traditional man's struggle when the world begins to move in a direction he doesn't recognize. As episode 1405 unfolds, we see that Hank isn't just fighting against soccer, he's fighting against change itself. He's fighting against the idea that the world might not value what he values anymore. And the cruel irony: the more he resists, the more the world pushes back. The more he clings to football, the more soccer invades his life. Until finally, Hank reaches a breaking point. And in that breaking point, fans witness the unthinkable Hank Hill, for the first time, turning away from the game he once considered untouchable, Asterisk, by the time episode 1405 rolls around, Hank has already lived through years of little battles against soccer creeping into his world. He has watched Bobby kick around a ball instead of picking up a football. He has listened to Peggy ramble about soccer's health benefits. He has seen neighborhood kids trading their helmets for shin guards. And for Hank Hill, every one of these moments was a small betrayal. But 1405 pushes him to the edge. The episode begins in the most ordinary of ways. Hank polishing his lawn, talking about the Cowboys' upcoming season, bragging about the purity of football. For a moment, the world feels normal. But then comes the announcement. Arlen is hosting a community sports showcase, a chance for kids to try different games. Hank expects it to be football-centered, the way it has always been. Instead, he finds soccer taking center stage. There are banners, balloons, even a local business sponsoring the event. And the worst part? Bobby is signed up to play in the soccer exhibition. This is where the tension starts to crack. Hank can't believe it. He walks through the field with that familiar frown, muttering under his breath about a bunch of kids running in circles. To him, the field looks chaotic. No order, no strategy, no structure like the game he loves. It is as if someone has taken everything he respects about sports and turned it into noise. But it isn't just Hank's irritation that drives the drama. It's his sense of betrayal. Football isn't just being ignored. It's being replaced. The announcers call soccer the future of Arlen athletics. Parents cheer louder than Hank has ever heard for a touchdown. Even his friends begin to drift toward the soccer side, curious about the excitement. For Hank, this isn't just an event. It's a funeral for the traditions he built his life around. Then comes the moment that shocks fans. Hank refuses to stand for the football game. In a silent but powerful gesture, he turns his back as the soccer kids flood the field. A man who once treated football like sacred ground now refuses to give it his respect. It's not a moment played for comedy. It's played for weight, for drama, for the unsettling feeling that something inside Hank has broken. Why would he do this? On the surface, it looks like betrayal. But if you listen to his words, if you watch his body language, you see something deeper. Hank isn't rejecting football out of hatred. He's rejecting it out of despair. In his eyes, football has already lost the fight. The kids aren't interested. The parents have moved on. The community has embraced something new. And in that moment, Hank feels abandoned by the very game he swore would always be there for him. The writers use this turning point not just to shock, but to make a statement. They show us a man who is deeply tied to tradition, standing powerless against change. When Hank turns his back, he isn't just walking away from football, he's mourning it. It's a symbolic funeral, a man grieving the loss of something he thought would last forever, and yet the irony is thick. The same Hank Hill who mocked soccer is now giving it power. By refusing to cheer for football, by turning away from the game, he indirectly acknowledges that soccer has won. The man who once laughed at soccer moms and orange slices is now forced to watch as they take the crown away from his beloved football. This section of the episode hits harder because it's not played as a joke. Fans are used to Hank being stubborn, to Hank ranting, to Hank embarrassing himself in small ways. But this is different. This is a quiet, heavy moment where the comedy fades and the weight of tradition collapsing comes into focus. It's unsettling because it feels real. It feels like every father who has ever seen his way of life slipping away in the face of a changing world. Episode 1405 doesn't answer all the questions in that moment. It doesn't tell us if Hank has truly betrayed football forever, or if this is just one of his stubborn tantrums. Instead, it leaves us in suspense, dangling in that uncomfortable space between loyalty and surrender. Fans argued endlessly. Did Hank really give up, or was this his way of protesting? Was it weakness, or was it strength? And that's what makes this section so unforgettable. Hank Hill, a man defined by his devotion to football, is suddenly painted as a man without a team, a man caught between two worlds. For the first time in the show's history, he isn't standing tall for tradition. He's standing in silence. His back turned, leaving us all wondering what happens next. Asterisk, when Hank Hill turned away from football in that unforgettable moment, the surface reaction was simple: shock, anger, confusion. But the true weight of that act lies in what it represents. Hank isn't just a character on a TV show. He's a reflection of a generation of Americans who cling tightly to the traditions that raised them, the values that shaped them, and the sports that defined their childhoods. And in this episode, that reflection becomes painfully clear. Football, for Hank, has always been more than a game. It's the glue that binds his identity. It represents teamwork, toughness, and discipline, the very traits he admires most. Football is about clear rules, about strength rewarded, about winners and losers decided by grit and strategy. For Hank, this sport is almost sacred. To see it losing ground to soccer feels like seeing the foundation of his world crack beneath his feet. Soccer, on the other hand, is everything Hank does not understand. To him, it's messy, unpredictable, even nonsensical. Where football is about territory and conquest, soccer is about patience, endurance, and flow. It lacks the blunt force Hank associates with masculinity. It feels foreign, distant, not Texan. So when soccer takes over, Hank isn't just annoyed, he feels displaced. Like a stranger in his own town, this is where the symbolism cuts deep. Hank's back isn't turned only on football, it's turned on change itself. His silent act becomes a metaphor for every man or woman who has felt their way of life slipping away in the face of cultural shifts. The rise of soccer in Arlen mirrors the rise of new ideas in America, ideas that don't always match the old ones. It's about tradition meeting modernity, about the old guard clashing with the new, but there's another layer, one that makes this moment even more personal: fatherhood. Hank isn't just fighting for football, he's fighting for a connection with his son. Bobby has always been different from what Hank hoped. He's not the star quarterback, not the rough and tough athlete Hank once dreamed of raising. Instead, Bobby is quirky, comedic, untraditional, and in this episode, he embraces soccer. That, for Hank, feels like the final blow. It isn't just the town abandoning football, it's his own son choosing a different path. The tragedy here is that Hank's turn away from football isn't just about sports. It's about losing his role as the guide, the teacher, the father who could pass down his values to the next generation. By turning his back, Hank is admitting defeat, not only to soccer, but to the idea that his son will inherit his love for the game. It's a quiet surrender, masked as stubborn pride. But deep down it's heartbreak. The writers of King of the Hill are clever in this moment. They don't let Hank rant or scream. They strip him of words and leave only the image, a proud man, silent, back-turned, refusing to participate. That silence is louder than any speech he could have given. It tells the audience that this isn't just funny, it's sad. It's a portrait of a man left behind by time. And yet, the brilliance of this scene is its ambiguity. Was Hank betraying football, or was he protecting it? Some fans argue that turning his back was Hank's way of protesting, of saying this isn't real football. This isn't what it's supposed to be. Others believe it was his quiet admission that the battle was already lost, and he didn't have the strength to fight anymore. That duality is what makes the moment stick in people's minds. It's not black and white, it's painfully gray. On a broader level, the episode forces viewers to confront their own relationship with tradition. How much of what we hold on to is truly about values, and how much is just fear of change? Hank's struggle mirrors countless real-world conversations about culture, about sports, about generational differences. The rise of soccer in America is not just about kicking a ball, it's about the blending of cultures, the reshaping of identity, the merging of old with new. And Hank, standing stubborn in the middle, becomes the face of resistance. But here's the final twist in this section. Even as Hank turns his back, soccer does not stop. The kids keep running, the parents keep cheering. The game goes on, with or without him. That's the cruel truth of change. It doesn't wait for permission. And in that realization lies the true heartbreak. Hank's stand, dramatic as it is, changes nothing. Football doesn't regain its crown. Soccer doesn't fade away. Life moves forward, and Hank is left standing still. That's why the scene feels so heavy. It's not just about a man rejecting a sport. It's about the futility of clinging too tightly to tradition in a world that refuses to freeze. Hank's back is turned not just to football, but to the future itself. Asterisk, when the credits rolled on episode 1405, the shock didn't fade with the screen. Fans of King of the Hill carried that image with them, the image of Hank Hill standing silent back, turned on the sport he loved most. It became more than just a scene in a sitcom. It became a conversation. Online forums lit up. Longtime fans debated in bars, living rooms, and fan clubs. What did this moment really mean? Was it betrayal, weakness, or something else entirely? Some argued that Hank had finally broken. That years of fighting against change, against Bobby's refusal to become the son he imagined, against Arlen drifting away from its Texas roots, had simply worn him down. To those fans, the gesture wasn't about football at all. It was about exhaustion. Hank was tired of resisting, tired of explaining, tired of watching the world move on without him. Turning his back was not rebellion, it was surrender. Others saw it differently. To them, Hank's silence was not weakness but protest. They believed it was his way of drawing a line in the sand. He would not cheer for soccer, he would not accept it, and he would not pretend it could ever replace football in his heart. For these fans, the moment was defiance. A man holding on to tradition even, when everyone else had given it up. His back, they argued, wasn't turned in shame, it was turned in loyalty. The truth, as with so much in King of the Hill, may lie somewhere in between. The genius of the show has always been its ability to mix humor with subtle, painfully real human truths. And here, the writers gave us a scene that resisted a single answer. Instead, they gave us Hank Hill as he always has been, complicated, stubborn, vulnerable, and deeply human. The legacy of that moment stretches beyond the episode. It taps into something larger than sports. Football versus soccer is just the surface. What the scene really captured was the universal struggle of tradition versus change. Every generation faces it. Parents watching their children grow up into a world they don't understand. Communities shifting their values and interests. Old ways giving way to new ones. Hank's back turn is a mirror for all of us. What happens when the world no longer plays by your rules? And then there's Bobby. The quiet genius of the episode is how it frames the father-son relationship at its core. Bobby doesn't see soccer as betrayal. For him, it's just a game, a place to laugh and play, a chance to be himself. The tragedy is that Hank can't see it that way. To Hank, Bobby's choice feels personal, like rejection. And in that divide between father and son, the writers capture something heartbreakingly real. The way generational gaps can twist love into misunderstanding. Hank turning away isn't just about football, it's about his fear of losing Bobby to a world he doesn't understand. Years later, fans still bring up the soccer controversy. When they talk about King of the Hill, it's remembered alongside some of the show's most iconic moments because it wasn't just funny, it was daring. It pushed Hank into uncomfortable territory and forced the audience to wrestle with questions far bigger than sports. It's proof of how King of the Hill, beneath its quiet suburban setting, always had the courage to explore the painful, awkward truths of American life. The legacy of the scene lingers because it asks an uncomfortable question. Can tradition survive without adaptation? Hank tried to hold on to football as it was, pure and untouchable, but the world doesn't freeze. The kids kept playing. The parents kept cheering. The game went on, whether Hank liked it or not. And in that, the writers remind us of something universal. Change does not need your permission. It comes anyway, and yet there is a strange kind of hope buried in the sadness. Because even though Hank turned his back in that moment, he didn't disappear. He didn't quit. He didn't abandon his family or his values. He simply struggled, as all of us do, to reconcile the old with the new. And maybe in his stubborn silence, he taught us something important. That change is hard. That it hurts. But that resisting it, even when futile, is part of what makes us human. So did Hank Hill betray football? Or did he honor it in the only way he knew how, by refusing to pretend it could be replaced? The episode never gives us an answer, and that's the brilliance of it. It leaves the question for us, the audience, to wrestle with, because in the end, maybe the real story isn't about football or soccer. Maybe it's about us, about what we choose to hold on to, what we're willing to let go of, and what we do when the world moves forward without asking if we're ready. And that's why Hank's silent turn remains one of the most powerful moments in King of the Hill, not because it changed the game on the field, but because it reminded us of the game we're all playing, the game between tradition and change.